Hi guys and welcome back. Today's video is going to be a practice video. I'm practicing the figure drawing, which is something that I have kind of neglected for a little while now, and there was a point where I was doing it every day because I really want to get better at this. This is kind of a big thing that I need to practice, and if I want to be a better artist, I absolutely need to get better and more comfortable drawing the figure. So this is one thing that I want to have as like part of my daily routine, where I sit down and I have to draw figures and I have to practice this. And I really genuinely love doing it. It's just one of those things where it's like, even if I love doing it, it's hard to keep it scheduled and make sure that it's happening every day. And suddenly it's been days and days since I've drawn it. So this is actually a combination of parts of 2 different days where I've been trying to get back into the habit of drawing figures and practicing. And so far I feel pretty good about it. I am definitely noticing that I'm really rusty, even on poses where they're just like basically standing there, very static poses. I'm still feeling a little bit rusty on that. So this is kind of just me trying to put myself into a better position of practice. And they say that to make something a habit, you have to do it 21 days in a row. And I definitely want to be sure that I'm getting to the point where I am doing figure drawing all the time. And I think what will maybe help me is if I make it so that I have to do it at a specific time, or I have to do it around a specific activity. So I have to, like, say I go to lunch and I come back, I have to figure draw, because I always have lunch at the same time. I go and I meet someone for lunch and I eat that. So I'm thinking that something really static like that, forcing myself to make that part of like what I have to do. It's not like, okay, I have to find time during the day to figure draw. I just have to, like, this is the time to draw. So I'm hopefully going to be able to make that part of the way that I work from now on. I have high hopes. I know that there's a lot of things that I'm kind of lazy at as far as art and what I'm trying to do with myself, and I don't want that to be the way that I work anymore, or the way that I think. I want to be someone who's very proactive and working on the things that I want to work on. So this is just hopefully going to put me in the right direction of getting better and better practice. But yeah, for these ones, like I mentioned, the first 2 are more dynamic ones, where I was looking up, I think I was Googling like dynamic action poses or something like that, and it brought up some pretty good things that had a lot of energy to it. And I think one thing, I think that for these first 2, I could have really pushed the energy in them a lot more. I mean, I'm actually pretty happy with them overall, but I think that's one thing that I do a lot of when I'm doing figures, that I don't quite push shapes enough or energy enough, and I don't strain those S curves. And that's really where like these amazing stylized artwork comes from, is when artists are really pushing the different shapes that they find in the body and those action lines. So I think that I can just get used to pushing things beyond the point that I think it looks good, and then find that balance, because I say you have to like push things past that point to know what is far enough. So yeah, I really want to get more exaggerated in those shapes, and especially in more subtle S curves. So there's a lot of like really subtle curves in the human body, like the way that the forearm forms, or in these ones specifically, there was these really very subtle shifts in the line of where their thighs were and how they connected to the knees. And that's the kind of thing that I normally have looked past in the past, where I don't really focus on these really fine details in the shift of how the muscles underneath are moving. So I'm trying to focus really hard on these really subtle things, and it's those subtle things that really push the realism of the poses. I've noticed that once I really try to make sure that I'm getting those very subtle inflections of how the body moves and how it looks, I am a lot happier with the overall look. And those are things that the more I practice and the more I'm attuned to finding them when I'm using reference, the more I'll be able to put those into my artwork when I'm not necessarily using reference, because I will have already had that visual concept and I've already practiced it. And right here is just where I'm adding a little bit of color. I'm filling in these figures and just giving them a little bit of a gradient. I have a hard time not using color when I'm working digitally, because it's right there. It's just so easy to throw it into the sketch, and I think it really elevates the final look of it. I love looking at these where they have this really pretty gradient that matches the color of the line work. So I'm happy I did that, but I think that I do need to start getting in a little bit more in the habit of not necessarily always relying on color to make me enjoy the final work. I need to be able to work more on drawing more figures and getting more mileage under my belt. But overall, I don't think I'll ever never use color when I'm doing figure drawing. I just think sometimes I can get a little distracted by that, and I think I spent a few too many minutes trying to get the color right for that background area. But yeah, I mean, I like color. It does make me feel a little bit more engaged with these sketches, so I'm totally okay with that. I just need to draw more figures to make up for it. But yeah, and then I do end up doing a couple more static figures like I talked about at the beginning, where they're a little bit more of a standing pose. But they're not like super boring. They're not just straight on super symmetrical or anything like that. And that's one thing that I don't think I'm very good at yet as far as drawing figures. Like when I'm drawing it from my own head, trying to make something work, I tend to look at it very linearly. So I'll work very symmetrically, or I'll do it straight on. And it's really pretty boring on most of the time. So I'm trying to practice poses like this where they don't necessarily have to be doing something crazy, but because they're turned a little bit more, they have a little bit more of a shape to them. You can see more unique overlapping, like how the arm is overlapping the torso. And I'm trying to get used to how things like that overlap in 3D, because that is, like I said, a big weakness of mine, is not really thinking as three-dimensionally as I would like to. So the more that I practice this, the more I look at poses that are more at an angle and I can see this overlapping look, the better I can be when I'm actually just drawing, or even when I am looking at reference and I'm doing a final piece, I'll have that kind of shape concept in my head already, and I'll be a lot more well acquainted with that. So that's one thing that I'm trying to really look for, is overlapping shapes, three-dimensionality, how the body looks when it's at these turned positions. And for the first two of these drawings, I used a brush that was very opaque. So it was 100% opaque, and the pressure sensitivity of my pen simply changed the width of the marks themselves. And the last two, I used a brush that was had the opacity set to pen pressure. So the lighter I had the pressure, the lighter the line work itself. And the darker it was, the harder I was pushing. And I think that for these, I definitely preferred the hard brush, so the one that was completely opaque at the beginning, because I noticed that I was able to put really definite details in there and make sure that I was getting the proportions correct, and it felt a lot more concrete, whereas in the last two, I could definitely feel myself getting a little bit on the lazy side with this really soft brush, where it wasn't as clear and precise and definite that where I was putting that line was absolutely where it was going to finally be, because I was using a much wider stroke that was a lot softer. It allowed me to be a lot sloppier and lazier with the placement, where I was just kind of throwing things down. And yeah, I think that for the first two, I learned a little bit better because I was being a little bit more studious, and I was definitely trying to be more attentive to those details. So I think it's definitely just like a mindset that I had myself in, and I was being a little bit too sloppy and brisk with the second brush. But I think it's also that I'm just a little bit more comfortable working very opaquely with a brush that's very sharp and clear cut. So I think this will be a good chance, working figure drawing, it'll be a good chance for me to try out different brushes to get different final results, and for me to get more comfortable using them. So I'm definitely glad that I did use it. But it's interesting to notice how it changed the way that I was looking at it, and the way that I was marking it, and the way that I had changed how I was studying the reference, because I wasn't being as specific and I wasn't studying exactly where things lined up. I was being a lot looser, and I think that I did get a lot more out of it when I was where I can very clearly see that that line was wrong and I had to fix it, or that it was right. But that is pretty much it for today's video. I am very happy that at least I've done figure drawing 2 days in a row, and hopefully I will be able to keep that as part of my schedule. I will probably show you some of my favorite figure drawings over time, where I'll kind of accumulate those together and then show you guys every once in a while. But for the most part, I am just excited about getting more practice and getting better at drawing figures. That is my goal. But yeah, that is it, like I said. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys at my next video.